Thank you for joining me here on the Animosaurus YouTube channel. With Warner Brothers releasing Scoob directly to video on demand, it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to actually break it down and start looking at it. Now, there are plenty of reviews already out on YouTube for this movie, so I'm not doing a review of the movie. I'm just going to be breaking down some of the framing and some of the storytelling techniques they've used within this movie. So stick around for that. If you want a quick breakdown of what I thought was good and bad, I'll do that at the end, but I'm going to be breaking down a couple of the sequences and a couple of the techniques they've used to help tell the story of Scoob. So Scoob is a reinvention of really old IP, so they've got a backlog of history of stuff they can dig on and dig out of. The first thing, I guess, which we've never really touched on, or I've never seen really touched on before, is Shaggy meeting Scooby. They've really brought this in at the start of the movie to go, where did these awesome two, join up with each other? So they've introduced us to Shaggy. Now, Shaggy, we learn about being an isolated little kid. And the first sequence is all about them. So I really love what they've done with the story techniques within this first sequence. One of the things they've done as we get introduced to Shaggy, beyond the bright colors and the bright sunshine, the first thing I really noticed was he was in a crowd. Now there's a lot of crowd of people around him, yet as we get introduced to him, like especially this shot on the background, which is really bright, it is also full of one of my favorite shapes to help draw attention to anyone is circles. And we've set up Shaggy directly within a circle. We've also put his eye line very high within the shot, even though he's the only one in here. We do get a few background characters kind of pass underneath this bottom third, but Shaggy himself is very high in the shot, and the camera is very low, looking up at him. The other thing which is really cool, really interesting, is they've used a very wide lens, because if you look at the straight edges, like the straight edges down on the board, they've actually got a bow in all of these straight edges. So they're even helping tell that Shaggy is a loner within the lens choice that they've chosen to make those edges all seem very rounded. They've used the camera position by putting it down low, looking up at him, to get rid of even the background characters that do shadow through during the shot. And of course, the music and audio they use in here as well really helps to tell the story that Shaggy is lonely. And as we cut through the sequence, we continue this theme going. I love this shot. I thought this worked really, really well. What they've done from the other shot is they've kept their horizon line really high in this shot. So we've gone from a really low horizon line to a really high horizon line. We've kept Shaggy center within the shot, but if we look at this crowd, it's all about negative space, this shot. Because poor Shaggy, even though when we look around the outside here, there is crowds everywhere around him. There's wall on this side. If we look at the leading lines of the buildings, they all come back this way. The leading lines of the walkway all lead us back to a point back here, which Shaggy himself is not actually walking towards. But we've got all this negative isolation space around him. And it's really important that when you're actually telling stories through the eye of the lens, to actually be aware of the negative space you're using and how you are using your negative space to tell a story. In this particular frame, we've used it really, really well to push the crowd away from him and actually have the main character, who's incredibly sad and alone, lonely. And he is. Visually, he's also put headphones in, so he's isolated himself with his headphones, and from the colors which are around as well. Most people are fairly bright colors, and yet we're seeing his shadow. If you look here, the shadows that we've got on front of this guy is fairly soft. At the back of Shaggy, he's got a fairly strong shadow too. So we've put our main character, the one we're meant to be telling the story about, we've told a lot about him inside this particular frame. And as we come back to him again, as he walks further away, we depress him even more. And so as we continue along, we've gone from a really high horizon line to now having the horizon line basically on the edge of the frame. All these buildings, when we look at them again, we're still using a very wide lens or a trick in the camera because buildings are square. So if we have a look at this, the buildings actually go in a bit of an archway leading back this way. Even the trees leave an archway back in this way, forcing around our main character this lovely negative space again. He is really, really alone. We've forced him in a negative V, so we've got an upside down V shape for him to work in. All the crowd are now hidden within the silhouette of these buildings or the tent and the trees. We've got action happening all around him, but within the negative frame or the negative shape, we've isolated our main character and given him an awesome silhouette, a fairly dark silhouette within this bright blue sky. So we're utilizing colors a lot and silhouettes to help tell the story that our main character's isolated. I really dug this little sequence they had in the bedroom. I thought this was really nice, and there's a few things I'd want to pick out about this one. The first thing I really like is they haven't used flat leading lines anywhere. There's no flat wall in the background. They've sat the camera on the bed so that all the leading lines from the wall all lead off in the distance and none of them are flat. Like the shelf, all the pattern on the bed, none of them are flat within the frame. I thought that was really nice placing for the two characters who are just sitting looking at each other. They sit really nicely within that. The other thing they've done really well is balanced out the light within this shot. The light comes in through this bright window on this side, which is giving both characters a really harsh lit edge on the back for them. Both the characters, there we go, they've both got really bright highlights on that side, but they've also added a big light on this side, which you'd probably guess would be a bed lamp or something, which is also then highlighted the other side of the character, so that they're well lit from both sides and nowhere are they actually in shadow. Now that helps because right in the background they've gone and given themselves this dark corner back here, and this bit in the middle, which they're then contrasting against, so we're contrasting the dark and light, really pops our characters forward because the background's dark and the characters are lit from both sides evenly, and it brings them and makes them pop off the background. I really love the way they've done that. Another quick thing to note between this is the way that these two guys are looking at each other. Their silhouettes are really nice, but if you ever try looking directly and talking to someone, you'll never have two eyes off to the side and looking at them. So they've staged this up so we actually get to see both of these characters' eyes, which is very much a 2D thing to do. These characters aren't actually looking at each other inside the scene space. If you were in the world and you rotated it anywhere else than the camera is, these guys would be looking at it across each other. But inside the shot and inside the frame, they're looking at each other. Another beautiful thing to see, which is a throwback to the 2D days, is have a look where Scooby's ear is. Because in 2D, you've got control of where his ears are attached to, so they've brought that into this 3D rig as well, which I think is really cool to be able to move the ears around so you can frame them up and make them look awesome. Again, that's part of his character design, and I've heard a couple of podcasts, or I heard a podcast about how technically challenging getting this sort of thing to happen is, because you've moved his snout around, you've used his smile around, but you've twisted his eyes back the other way and you've twisted his ears. Oh man, I geek out at that, and I'm so happy that they've been able to share a lot of this technical stuff. And I'll leave a link down to a really cool podcast from Cartoon Brew. Check that out because there's some really interesting techniques used to get this character to work. And the last one I want to bring up, I loved that they brought Dick Dastardly in and reimagined him. I thought he was, I don't. I love that they brought Dick Dastardly in, and I think they did a brilliant job with this character. The way that they've brought his mood into, or the character to life within this world was really, really cool. If we look at the color scheme within this shot, he's bottom lit so that a lot of the shadows are really high on him. He's got a rim light around him, so he's got some really great rim lighting happening around him. He's a different color to his background, even though he's purple. They've lit him with red from the bottom, so I don't know where that red light comes from because that would be under the seat somewhere. But that's really nice. He's got a nice rim light to help him pop, and he's got his shadows really coming over in front of him. So he's very much the sinister guy in the dark. So his face itself is very dark as well. I don't know where that light's coming from to light up his face, but it's there. So he's got a bottom half. This light is yellow. The top half's dark. And the thing which I dig about him is he's also shaped or framed by a circle, and the leading lines of all of these cogs lead you in to Dick Dastardly. So that gets me through the analysis of Scoob. I dug this movie. I really enjoyed it. From seeing the trailer, I thought this was going to be good. Now, the good bits which I dug out of it. The original voice actor, having Frank Welker be Scooby-Doo's voice, really held it together. The other voice actors are new and refreshed, but Frank Welker did hold up Scoob. I can't imagine anyone else being Scooby. It was great that it wasn't a love story. Like some of the other Scooby-Doos have gone, some of the live-action Scooby-Doos have taken it to being more of a romantic story. I'm glad this one's just completely left it as friends working together. The animation within this movie is amazing. They have pulled that off really, really well. And that craft that they've brought to this is brilliant. Personally, I loved seeing the Hanna-Barbera characters being brought to life again. I was a big Wacky Races fan, so it was great for me to see a lot of these Wacky Races characters coming to life, because I don't think they'd get their own franchise or they'd be able to lead into their own storylines, but it's great that they've brought them in with Scoob. The stuff I didn't think worked quite as well, the old sound effects which they brought in, they just sounded like they were overdubbed and didn't really add to the story. They were more a bit a throwback, and it's just like, man, they just sounded out. I really wanted to get more of Muttley. Again, that's probably just my personal favourite character, because Dick Dastardly and Muttley I kind of really like, but I would have liked to have seen more of Muttley and Dick Dastardly try to be part of the mystery, but there was not enough of mystery seeking or solving in this. I don't think we got enough time with Fred, Daphne and Velma to help develop them into this new world which they're trying to create. I would have loved to have seen them actually solving a mystery through this. I just think that their mystery which they did solve wasn't really a strong mystery for them to solve. Now, I know that Scooby-Doo did have a lot of, special guest characters back in the day, and they always brought someone in. And Simon Cowell, in my notes, I just got, what, the Simon Cowell? I didn't really like that. And there was definitely a big push to kind of bring in a Minions type character with all the little robots, which were a supporting character to Dick Dastardly. Personally, I don't think you needed them. They didn't really add a lot beyond a little bit of character humour, which is what I think I would have brought in with Muttley if I was dealing this. I liked Muttley a lot more, so the play of Dick Dastardly and Muttley I think would have worked a lot better than introducing these little... And there was no Jinkies. Velma always said Jinkies. I actually missed that line. But that's it. Thank you so much for going through this with me. Let me know your thoughts on what you thought of Scoob down below, and if there was any bits that you'd like me to pull apart. But until the next time I see you, bye-bye.